Hello class, and welcome to video 2 of our chapter 16 video lecture series. In our first video, we went over types of reasoning. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the different forms of reasoning that exist. Your textbook discusses 4 different forms of reasoning, which are reasoning by cause, reasoning by sign, reasoning by example, and reasoning by analogy. Let's go ahead and get started by looking at reasoning by cause. Reasoning by cause is when you claim that one occurrence creates a specific effect. This can be accomplished in one of two ways, either by describing a necessary cause or a sufficient cause. A necessary cause is a cause that must be present for the effect to happen. For example, in order to graduate from Cal State LA, you must have successfully passed a public speaking course. The effect of graduation cannot happen without the cause of successfully passing a public speaking course. Another way you can reason by cause is through sufficient cause. Sufficient cause is a cause that can produce the effect in question. For example, practicing your persuasive speech in front of the mirror can help you to give a successful persuasive speech to your COM 1100 class. There are other ways that you can produce the effect of a good persuasive speech for your COM 1100 class, but practicing in front of the mirror is one way that can help you do that. So it's sufficient, though it's not necessary. The second form of reasoning we'll discuss is reasoning by sign. Reasoning by sign argues that the presence of one case indicates the presence of another. For example, your cell phone suddenly being unresponsive and not turning on would be a sign that your battery has died. So the presence of a black, non-responsive screen would indicate or signal the presence of the case of a dead battery. The third form of reasoning we'll discuss is reasoning by example. Reasoning by example uses related examples to draw an overall conclusion. Let's take a look at this using our COM 1100 class as an example below. So let's say that for your first speech, your personal purpose speech, you thought, I have this down. There's literally no reason I need to practice this. So you don't practice, you come up and give your speech, and you get a C. For your second speech, you think, Instructor A really keeps bugging us about this practicing thing. Let me give it a try and see what happens. So you practice a little, and you get a B. So for your final speech, your persuasive speech, you think, I think I'm onto something. Let's practice a lot and see what happens. And you get an A. At this point, you've probably come to the conclusion that the amount of time you practice directly correlates to the grade that you receive. There is one thing to note about reasoning by example. The more relevant the examples you use, the stronger your conclusion will be. So let's say that instead of giving 3 different speeches, you gave your personal purpose speech 3 times. First with no practice, then with some practice, and then with a lot of practice. This would lead to a stronger conclusion that the amount that you practice directly correlates with how well you do on that speech. The fourth and final form of reasoning we'll discuss is reasoning by analogy. Reasoning by analogy uses common elements between different cases to argue that what is true in one situation will also be true in another. This is different than reasoning by example because only one similar instance is needed. When reasoning by analogy, there are 2 different types of analogies that you can use. The first is a literal analogy, which compares 2 cases from the same classification. The second is a figurative analogy, which compares cases from different classifications. Let's compare these 2 types of analogies with an example. Let's say you're talking to a friend that has to take COM 1100 next semester, and they ask you what you thought of the course. You could tell them that you don't really like public speaking, but you had an instructor you liked, and you think if they took the same instructor, they would like them too. This would be a literal analogy because you're comparing 2 cases from the same classification by saying that you and your friend are alike, it's the same course and the same instructor, so you expect the same result, that they would also like the instructor. However, if you were looking for your own courses next semester and said, I liked instructor A in COM 1100, I bet she'd be a great computer science instructor too. This would be a figurative analogy because COM 1100 and computer science are not the same thing. While you could argue that giving examples, allowing class time for questions, sending reminders, and answering emails in a timely manner are something you'd like in a computer science instructor, This doesn't mean that I'd be able to teach the content. This is where it's important to note that when using figurative analogies, you must be more explicit about areas of comparison and why they are related in order to make a strong argument. Okay, let's wrap up. In this video, we covered the 4 different forms of reasoning, which were cause, sign, example, and analogy. Thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to seeing you for video 3 of Chapter 16, where we'll discuss logical fallacies.